The Westlands is a chessboard, and its nobles are pieces, moved by ambition, bound by loyalty, and blind to the hand that guides them. For Moiraine Damodred, this wasn't chaos, it was opportunity. Long before Rand al'Thor ever wielded Kalandor, Moiraine was playing a game of thrones far larger than any lord's petty squabbles. Her moves were quiet, her tactics invisible, but every manipulation of a noble, every shift in court dynamics was a step toward clearing a path for the Dragon Reborn. The intricate dance with nobles and rulers examined specific instances where Moiraine manipulated political figures and court dynamics to clear a path for the Dragon Reborn. Take her work in Caerhien, her home country, where power hung precariously between rival noble houses. After the death of King Lamon de Modred, her cousin, whose pride sparked the Aiel War, Caerhien descended into a web of assassinations and alliances. Moiraine didn't seize the throne, she became its shadow. She leveraged her Damodred lineage to broker a fragile truce between House Riatan and House Maravael, meeting secretly with their lords in the cellars of the Damodred Palace. To Lord Riatan, she promised support in his bid for the Sun Throne if he halted his raids on borderland caravans, raids that would have blocked Rand's future path north. To Lord Maravael, she revealed evidence of Riatan's secret dealings with Dark Friends, enough to make him trust her as a fellow enemy of the Shadow. The truce held, not out of goodwill, but out of mutual fear and ambition, both stoked by Moiraine. She never once mentioned the Dragon Reborn. She didn't need to. By stabilizing Caerhien, she ensured Rand would have a safe haven in the east, a place to regroup when the Shadow came for him. In Geldon, she played a different game, one of religion and rebellion. The country was torn between the Prophet of the Dragon, a false claimant manipulated by the Shadow, and Queen Alliandre Maritha Kigali, a young ruler struggling to hold her throne. Moiraine arrived at court disguised as a merchant's advisor, her Aes Sedai ring hidden, her power masked. She whispered to Queen Alliandre that the Prophet's followers were being infiltrated by Dark Friends, planting seeds of doubt that grew into action. She then slipped a coded message to the Prophet's second-in-command, an old contact from her spy network, hinting that the Queen was planning to ally with the White Tower to crush the rebellion. The result? A standoff, not a war. The Prophet's forces pulled back from the capital, and the Queen, grateful for the warning that let her avoid bloodshed, pledged to aid any refugees from the North refugees Moiraine knew would be Rand and his friends. Again, no mention of the dragon, just a subtle nudge that turned a potential enemy into an ally. From Caerhien to Ghealdan, trace her strategic movements across nations, showing how she used existing power structures to her advantage, often invisibly. Moiraine never fought a country's politics head-on, she bent them to her will. In Andor, she exploited the rivalry between Queen Morgase Trakand and her son Gwynd to ensure the White Tower's influence in Caemlyn didn't turn hostile to Rand. She told Morgase that Gwynd's growing alliance with the Red Ajah, who hated male channelers, could threaten her throne, prompting the Queen to rein him in. In Shienar, she leaned on Lord Agelmar's devotion to the borderlands, framing Rand's arrival as a blessing that would strengthen their defenses against the Blight, ensuring the Lord would train and protect the Dragon Reborn without question. Her movements were calculated, not random. She traveled to nations where power was fragmented, where alliances were fragile, and where a single whisper could shift the balance. In each place, she identified the key players, the ambitious lord, the fearful ruler, the loyal advisor. She gave them what they wanted: power, safety, revenge, and in return, they gave her what she needed: a clear path for Rand, a network of safe havens, and a world that wouldn't crumble the moment the dragon revealed himself. She didn't create new power structures, she used the ones already in place, turning Lord's greed and Queen's fears into tools for her mission. Unpacking the Great Game through Moiraine's lens, how her actions weren't just about finding the dragon, but about shaping the world for his coming. For Moiraine, the Game of Houses wasn't a distraction, it was a necessity. The Dragon Reborn couldn't save a world torn apart by civil war, by lords who would betray him for a crown, by rulers who would fear his power more than the Dark One. So she set to work, weakening Dark Friend sympathizers in noble courts, strengthening alliances between nations that would need to stand together against the Shadow, and planting seeds of faith in the prophecy. So when Rand finally claimed his title, the world wouldn't reject him. In Caerhien, her truce didn't just stabilize the country, it created a buffer between the Aiel Waste and the Western nations, preventing a second Aiel War that would have drained resources needed for the last battle. In Geldon, her manipulation of the Prophet and Queen ensured the country wouldn't become a stronghold for the Shadow's false dragon, keeping the real dragon's path clear. In Andor, Her work with Queen Morghese laid the groundwork for an alliance that would later supply troops and supplies to Rand's cause. Every move was a brick in the foundation of a world that could survive the dragon's rise. Moiraine's genius in the Great Game was her ability to see the bigger picture. While lords fought over thrones and queens worried about rebellions, she saw the Dark One's hand in every conflict and moved to counter it. She didn't care who sat on Kirhian's Sun Throne, only that the throne was held by someone who wouldn't aid the Shadow. She didn't care if Queen Alliandre hated the Prophet, only that Ghealdan remained a safe passage for Rand. She played not for power, but for survival, for Rands, for the Westlands, for humanities. What makes her political machinations so breathtaking is their invisibility. To the nobles she manipulated, she was just another player, an ambitious Damodred, a helpful advisor, a mysterious stranger. They never knew they were pieces in her game, never realized their actions were shaping the fate of the world. Even Rand, in the early days of his journey, had no idea how many lords had been bribed, how many courts had been swayed, how many wars had been averted, all to clear his path. As Moiraine continued her journey, moving from one court to the next, her chessboard expanded. She added new pieces: a Tyren lord indebted to her for saving his daughter, a Shienaran general who owed her a favor, a tarmongaidon merchant who smuggled her messages across borders. Each piece had a role, each move part of a grand design. The game of houses wasn't just about winning. It was about ensuring the dragon had a world left to save. In the end, Moiraine's political chess was a testament to her unyielding resolve. She fought in palaces and cellars, with words and whispers, with favors and threats, all while carrying the weight of a prophecy that could destroy her. She didn't seek glory, she sought results. And when Rand al'Thor finally stepped forward as the Dragon Reborn, he walked into a world that, thanks to her, was just stable enough to stand with him, just united enough to fight beside him, just ready enough to embrace the prophecy that would decide everything. The Westlands nobles would never know the hand that guided them. The lords and queens would take credit for their truces, their alliances, their survival. But Moiraine knew the truth. She was the invisible player, the master of the game, the one who turned chaos into order, one political move at a time. And in the end, that's what saved the world. Not just the dragon's power, but the quiet, brilliant chess game that made his victory possible. In the shadow of the Dark One's rise, loyalty is a lie, and enemies are often the most useful pawns. For Moiraine Damodred, there was no line too risky to cross, no ally too morally compromised to leverage. While other Aes Sedai shunned dark friends as irredeemable foes, Moiraine saw them as a weapon, one to be wielded with precision, caution, and a willingness to dance on the edge of betrayal. Her gambit of playing both sides wasn't recklessness. It was cold, calculated strategy, turning the Shadow's own agents into unwitting architects of its defeat. The risky gambit of playing both sides: investigate her calculated interactions with individuals who might initially seem antagonistic, but who unwittingly served her purpose. Consider her dance with Goran, a mid-level dark friend leader in Tyr, whose greed made him blind to manipulation. Goran's network controlled smuggling routes through the Stone of Tyr routes. Rand would need to access Kalandor. Instead of eliminating him, Moiraine sought him out in a smoky tavern, her face hidden by a hood, her voice low with feigned desperation. She offered him a chest of gold, siphoned from Kerhan and noble vaults, in exchange for safe passage for a group of refugees fleeing shadowspawn. What Goran didn't know was that the refugees would be Rand and his friends, and that the gold was cursed with a subtle weave of the One Power, marking his men so Moiraine could track their movements. Worse for Goran, Moiraine leaked word of his treason to a rival Darkfriend faction, sparking a turf war that diverted the Shadow's attention from Rand's arrival. By the time Goran realized he'd been played, his network was in shambles, his men dead or scattered, and Rand had slipped into the stone unopposed. Moiraine never touched him. She let the Shadow destroy its own. That was her genius. She didn't fight dark friends. She made them fight each other, their chaos, clearing a path for the Dragon Reborn. Unmasking the unlikely informants, reveal how even supposed enemies or neutral parties provided critical intelligence or obstacles that Moiraine could exploit. Few embodied this better than Elric, a Terraboner merchant who dabbled in Darkfriend politics to protect his family. Elric wasn't a true believer in the Shadow. He was a survivor, paying tribute to Darkfriend cells to keep his daughter safe from harm. Moiraine identified him during a trip to Tanchico, recognizing the fear in his eyes behind the bravado. Instead of exposing him, she approached him in secret, offering a deal. She'd eliminate the Darkfriend cell threatening his family if he fed her information about the Shadow's plans to infiltrate the Terraboner government. Elric agreed, and for months he passed coded messages hidden in shipments of silk details about shadowspawn movements, names of corrupted nobles, and even the location of a cache of poisoned wine meant for Rand's allies. He was an enemy by association, a neutral party forced into darkness, but his fear became Moiraine's most reliable intelligence stream. Another unlikely informant was Mara, a red Aja sister with sympathies for the Shadow. Mara hated male channelers and saw the Dragon Reborn as a threat to the White Tower's power, so she secretly passed information to Dark Friends about Aes Sedai movements. Moiraine learned of Mara's treachery through her White Tower network, but instead of exposing her, she used her. She fed Mara false reports, claiming Rand would be in Kemlin on a certain date, that he was weak and unprotected. Mara passed the lies to her Dark Friend contacts, who mobilized forces to ambush him. Forces that walked straight into a trap Moiraine had set with green Aja warders. Mara never knew she was being used. She died believing she was serving the Shadow, while her actions had eliminated an entire cell of Dark Friends. To Moiraine, her moral failing wasn't a flaw. It was a tool. The blurred lines of loyalty discuss how Moiraine's pragmatic approach meant utilizing anyone, regardless of their moral standing, if they furthered her ultimate goal. Moiraine never trusted Dark Friends. She didn't trust anyone, but she understood that their motivations, greed, fear, vengeance, were predictable, and predictability was power. She never revealed her true intentions, never let them get close enough to betray her, and always had an exit strategy. When dealing with Goran, she used a false identity. With Elric, she never met him face to face. With Mara, she ensured the trap would take her out too. Her pragmatism was ruthless, but it was born of necessity. The Dark One didn't play by moral rules, and neither could she. For Moiraine, there was no such thing as too far. She let Dark Friends escape justice if it meant saving Rand's life. Let them harm innocents if the cost was greater than the loss. Let them believe they held power while she pulled the strings. Once, she even allowed a Dark Friend to kidnap a village girl, knowing the girl's father. A skilled blacksmith would rally villagers to rescue her, creating a distraction that let Rand slip past a Trolloc patrol. The girl was unharmed. The father hailed as a hero, and the Dark Friend was later executed by his own allies for failing to deliver the dragon. Moiraine never apologized for the gambit. She never looked back. The world was at stake, and moral purity was a luxury she couldn't afford. What made her use of Dark Friends so extraordinary was her ability to see beyond their labels. She didn't see them as evil. She saw them as broken, greedy, or frightened people, and she exploited those weaknesses without mercy. She didn't just use their actions. She used their fears, their ambitions, their own self-destruction. A Dark Friend, motivated by greed, would always choose gold over the Shadow. One motivated by fear would betray the Dark One to save themselves. One motivated by hatred would act impulsively, playing right into her hands. Moiraine understood this better than anyone, and she turned their darkest traits against them. This wasn't alliance. It was manipulation of the highest order. Moiraine never offered redemption, never sought to turn Dark Friends to the light. She used them up and discarded them, leaving them to the mercy of the Shadow or the White Tower. To her, they were disposable, just like any other tool. But that disposability was part of the strategy. By never growing attached, by never trusting, she ensured she was never betrayed. The Dark Friends thought they were using her for gold, for power, for the chance to serve the Dark One. But in reality, they were just cogs in her machine, turning to grind down the Shadow's defenses. In the end, Moiraine's unconventional allies were a testament to her unwavering focus. She didn't care if the hands that helped her were stained with blood. She only cared if they cleared the path for the Dragon Reborn. Dark Friends, traitors, and morally gray survivors, all were pieces in her grand design, wielded with cold brilliance to fight a war that couldn't be won with honor alone. As Rand al'Thor stepped forward to face the Dark One, he never knew how many Dark Friends had unwittingly aided his journey, how many traps had been diverted, how many paths had been cleared, all by a woman who dared to dance with the enemy. Moiraine's gambit had paid off. The Shadow's own agents had become its undoing, their chaos creating the space Rand needed to fulfill his prophecy. Loyalty, morality, good and evil. These were luxuries for those who didn't carry the weight of the world. For Moiraine Damodred, the only thing that mattered was victory. And if victory required walking with Dark Friends, using their greed as fuel and their fear as a weapon, then she would walk that path alone, unflinching, unapologetic, and always one step ahead of the betrayal she knew was coming. In the end, that's what made her the deadliest player in the game. Against the Dark One, she wasn't afraid to be as ruthless as the enemy itself. The Wheel of Time turns, and what seems like a single thread in its tapestry often unravels into a network that spans decades, even lifetimes. Moiraine de Modred's work didn't end with her apparent death at the Eye of the World, nor did it begin with her arrival in Emond's Field. Her unseen alliances, covert operations, and calculated manipulations weren't just tools for the Dragon Reborn's early journey. They were the foundation of a legacy that shaped the entire course of the war against the Dark One. Beyond the first 3 books, her influence ripples through every victory, every alliance, and every narrow escape, proof that the true scope of her web was far larger than anyone, even Rand al'Thor himself, ever realized. To understand Moiraine's long-term impact, one need only look at Cirhaen, the nation she stabilized with a fragile truce between warring houses. Years later, when Rand seized the Sun Throne to end the Aiel War, he didn't inherit a country torn by civil war. He inherited one that Moiraine had primed for unity. The lords she'd bribed, the alliances she'd brokered, and the dark friend cells she'd dismantled meant Rand faced minimal resistance when he claimed his right as a Damodred. Without her early work, Cirhaen would have collapsed into chaos, leaving Rand without an eastern stronghold during the last battle. Similarly, her manipulation of Ghealdan's Queen Alliandre wasn't just a short-term gambit to protect Rand's passage. It forged a loyalty that led Alliandre to swear fealty to Rand later, bringing Ghealdan's armies to his side when he needed them most. Moiraine never lived to see these fruits of her labor, but that was part of her genius. She planned for a future she might never witness, weaving a web that outlived her physical presence. Her groundwork didn't just enable triumphs, it softened the blow of the darkest challenges Rand and his companions faced. Consider the White Tower's fracturing, when the Red Ajah seized power and declared Rand an enemy of the Tower. In those dark days, Rand found allies in Brown Ajah archivists who shared forbidden prophecies, Green Ajah warders who defied Tower orders to protect him, and even Yellow Ajah sisters who secretly healed his allies. All of these were threads Moiraine had woven years earlier, debts owed, loyalties nurtured, and favors granted that came to fruition when hope seemed lost. When Mat Cauthon stumbled into the Band of the Red Hand, he didn't just find a mercenary group. He found a faction that Moiraine had subtly influenced decades before, planting seeds of loyalty to the Dragon Reborn in their leaders. When Perrin Ibarra struggled to unite the Wolves and the Two Rivers folk, he leaned on the trust Moiraine had built between the village and the outside world, a trust that made his people willing to follow a man with wolf senses. Every step Rand took toward fulfilling the prophecy was paved with Moiraine's early choices. Every ally he gained was a debt she'd paid. Every obstacle he overcame was a trap she'd disarmed. Nowhere is this connection clearer than in Rand's quest to cleanse Saidin. Moiraine's research into ancient Angreal and Terangreal, smuggled from the White Tower's archives by her ally, Lyrael, provided the blueprints for the sa'angreal he used at Shadar Logoth. The intelligence she'd gathered on the Shadow's corruption of Saidin, passed to Brown Ajah scholars before her disappearance, gave Rand the knowledge he needed to survive the process. Even the Aiel's willingness to follow Rand, the Karakarn, traced back to Moiraine's quiet work among the Aiel Waste's fringe groups, who'd spread tales of a coming dragon who would heal the world. Moiraine didn't just guide Rand, she prepared the entire world to accept him, even when he couldn't accept himself. Yet for all we know of her legacy, countless secrets remain buried, unanswered questions that hint at an even grander design. Who was the Watcher in the Waste she referenced in her secret files? The contact who provided updates on the Seanchan invasion long before the Empire's forces reached the Westlands. Was it a rogue Aiel clan chief? A disgraced Seanchan noble? Or someone even closer to the Shadow's inner circle? What of the cache of Angreal she hid in the Blight, mentioned in a single cipher note but never retrieved? Could it be the key to defeating the Dark One's most powerful servants in the final battle? And what of her network in the White Tower, the allies she never named? Are there still Aes Sedai operating in the shadows, carrying out her plans decades after her supposed death? These questions aren't just gaps in the narrative. They're testaments to Moiraine's meticulousness. She never revealed her full hand, even to those closest to her, ensuring that if one thread of her web was cut, others would hold. Her legacy of secrecy means we can never be certain how many of the Westland's coincidences were her doing. A merchant who happened to have a map of the ways, a wise woman who knew a healing for channeling sickness, a noble who defected from the Shadow at the critical moment. All could be part of her unseen network, continuing to shape events long after she was gone. The implications of this are staggering. If Moiraine's planning extends this far, what other traps, alliances, or resources has she hidden for the final confrontation with the Dark One? Could her network be the reason the White Tower eventually reunites? Or the key to breaking the Seanchan's hold on the Westlands? And what if her death at the Eye of the World was itself a gambit? A way to step out of the spotlight so she could continue manipulating events from the shadows, free from the Dark One's direct scrutiny. Moiraine de Modred's legacy isn't just that of a guide or a protector. It's that of an architect of destiny. She didn't just find the dragon reborn. She built a world where he could win. Her web stretches across nations, through centuries, and beyond death itself, a testament to the power of secrecy, patience, and unyielding purpose. As the wheel turns toward the last battle, every ally Rand has, every advantage he holds, every hope that remains can be traced back to a woman who worked in the shadows, pulling strings no one else could see. The true scope of Moiraine's web is this. She didn't just play the game. She rewrote the rules. She turned enemies into pawns, chaos into order, and prophecy into reality. And as the final showdown between light and dark approaches, one truth becomes undeniable. The Dragon Reborn might be the one who wields Kalandor, but it was Moiraine who forged the path for him to do so. Her legacy of secrecy isn't just a part of the Wheel of Time. It's the silent force that keeps it turning toward light. The questions may never be fully answered, the threads of her web may never be fully unraveled, but that's by design. Moiraine knew that the greatest power lies in what others don't see. And as the world holds its breath for the last battle, we can only wonder, what other secrets has she hidden, and how will they shape the final fate of the Wheel of Time? One thing is certain, Moiraine Damodred's work isn't done. Her web is still spinning, and its final threads are yet to be revealed.